Get the cash flow you need with an APP cash advance from CCGA. Pay expenses, make upgrades, perform maintenance, and more with interest-free and low-interest financing. Visit ccga.ca. Cash advances are made under the Government of Canada's Advance Payments Program.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Tuesday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. It is also great to have everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. Lots of stuff to discuss here today. Thanks to Lindsay Smith for being yesterday's guest host. Her and Pete had a great conversation about all things agronomics. Today's show, speaking of agronomy, is brought to you by Koch Ag Services. Whether it's Anvil or it's Super U, Koch has a great lineup of products, all tied to boosting your productivity and the efficiency and everything that you're doing in your field, launching that crop out of the ground. Make sure you go to kochag.ca or kochagronomicservices.com. Okay, today we are going to focus in on this rail strike, and it has not happened yet, but we're going to get the details from two people. We are going to hear from Kyle Larkin of the Grain Growers of Canada. We're also going to hear from Greg Northey of Pulse Canada. Greg also tied into the Ag Transport Coalition as well. This is unprecedented. This is a heavy, heavy situation, and we've only got, realistically, like 10 days till both railways in Canada go on strike. And it's not just about grain movement, because I think we tend to, as Canadians, just think this is a Western Canadian thing, and it's just about grain movement, and hey, exports won't happen. There's also stuff coming into the country. There's stuff, as I just mentioned, going out of the country that's more than just grain. We're talking about energy. We're talking about forestry. We're talking about auto. You name a sector, and it depends on rail. And it's going to come to a grinding, just screeching halt. You know, like when a train throws the brakes on when you're watching a movie and you hear that screech? That's kind of what's going to sound like. And that's also our economy coming down to a standstill. This is bad. We're also going to hear today from Justin Funk of RealAgristudies, and we're going to look at the July results of the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index. Some very interesting stuff there as well. So looking forward to chatting with Justin here today. We've also got, because I said today's show is brought to you by Koch Ag Services. From Koch today, we've got Bryce Geisel, sorry. Bryce will be on the show today to talk about some of the products that Koch has to offer for you and your farm as we start to think about the 2025 growing season. That's right. We can't, a lot of things in ag overlap. You don't get these like stops and starts. It's not like a football season where, hey, it's end of season, it's the postseason, now it's the off season, and we think about the preseason. In agriculture, we have lots of overlap. It's not like a football field or like a football game, okay? That's just not the way that it works. So we've got to think about 25 now, even though we don't have 24 in the crop yet, or in the bin yet. Hey, if you have any feedback, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms. You're also more than welcome to call the RealAg feedback line. What's your feedback on what you think about this strike? Also some of these numbers on the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index as well. You can do that by by calling the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Let's take a break and we're back with Kyle Larkin of Grain Growers of Canada right after this.
Join us for the Canadian Beef Industry Conference, August 19th to 22nd in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Spend time networking on the trade show floor, hear from keynote speakers, and take in breakout sessions designed to increase profit, manage your rangeland, and navigate trends. Get up close to advanced techniques and hands-on demos, and kicking it all off is Lamley's Bull event. Proud, sustainable, and innovative, we are beef. Registration is now open. Visit CanadianBeefIndustryConference.com for full details and to register.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
If you have a growing list of questions about getting more from your fields, know that Koch Ag Services has an answer for every acre. With a full spectrum of nutrient management, nutrient protection, and seed enhancement options, Koch Ag Services offers a deep portfolio of agronomically effective products, each designed to enhance yield potential, all available to help solve your problems. Find the answer that's right for your acres. Start by visiting kochag.ca. That's Koch ag.ca.
Well, an issue that has a lot of people concerned, farmers, I think Canadians just in general, is what potentially could happen here on August 22nd, or maybe the days following, in terms of a rail strike of over 9,000 rail workers across CN and CPKC. Joining us right now to discuss some of the agricultural implications and hopefully some hope, so to speak. It is Kyle Larkin. He is the Executive Director with the Grain Growers of Canada, based out of Ottawa. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Shaun.
Okay, man. I guess we had the end of last week the CRIB decision. Now, they were looking at overall, I guess, safety concerns relative to propane and basic supplies, the railways, or essential services or supplies, I guess. That ruling was, my take when I read it, a little bit lighter than I thought. I thought they were going to come out a little bit stronger in terms of some of these things being a little bit more essential.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed in the ruling. I mean, they were looking at essential products that included propane and included agricultural products, included a whole suite of things. I was fairly disappointed. I mean, if they're looking at the mandate of safety of Canadians, which I read into the well-being of Canadians, I think the transportation of things like propane is important for northern communities that rely on it. That's for sure. But at the same time, I think that the transportation of grain is fairly important as well. In my personal opinion, economic security is the security and safety of Canadians. So economic security and food security, especially for domestic usage and international usage, in my personal opinion, is important. But the CIRB obviously didn't see it that way. I think a small win, if you want to take a small win out of it, is that we had a cool down period implemented. We could have seen a strike starting today. If we didn't have that cool down period. So at least we have until August 22nd to see a possible work stoppage. I think the answers from some of the railways too is a little disappointing as well. We already saw from CPKC, for example, that they're going to have a lockout start August 22nd. So no matter, even if the union was going to delay their strike, let's say past August 22nd, well, the workers are going to be locked down anyway. So we know for sure we're going to see a work stoppage at least on one of the railways on August 22nd. So that's a worry. And really the only thing we can do is call on all parties to get back to the table and get a deal done before that date comes along.
There was hope that the two parties would come to some sort of a resolution between when the minister came up with this idea and the end of last week. But it doesn't seem like there's been a lot of movement or a lot of at least positive rumors coming out of those talks.
To me, it seems that that all the parties are stuck in their own positions. CP wants something, CN wants something, and the Teamsters union wants something else. The sticking points I've heard for the union is really around safety and around the railways. They're looking for more service in general. Surprisingly, it doesn't really seem as if the discussion of money, the discussion of salaries and dollars is really at the forefront of these negotiations. It's really around service and safety, and I think some of those conversations are opposing each other.
Well, if this strike happens August 22nd, we're into a new crop shipping season. You know, if from a Western Canadian perspective, and there's lots of components and moving parts of this, but let's just think about the Western Canadian crop for a second.
Yeah.
What's the impact if this strike happens from a grain movement perspective?
Massive impact. I think most grain farmers know the impact of when a railway goes on strike. What they don't know and what we don't know is when both railways go on strike. This would be the first time ever in Canadian history where we have both CN and CP on strike. So what we've been able to see previously, let's say CP goes on strike, CN's still operating. Well, at least farmers have an option. This would give them zero options. All our Class 1 railways would be on strike. 0% of grain would be moving. And so the immediate impacts would be grain elevator storage would get full. Storage on farms is going to get full. So grain farmers are going to have to figure out where to put their grain. They're going to have to figure that out pretty quickly. The other impact too is obviously grain farmers aren't going to be able to sell their grain. They're not going to be able to make money. So while they've been growing crops and the harvest just started, I think most farmers are excited to make some money off of their crops that they're harvesting right now. They're not going to be able to start August 22nd if we see a work stoppage on both railways.
Now, from getting into the weeds here a little bit, will there be trains running, or is this like a total shutdown?
From what I've heard, it's a total shutdown. So it's not just grain, right? It's everything and almost anything that Canadians rely on. I think most Canadians don't know how much is transported by rail, right? It's your TVs and your couches and your iPhones, but it's also grain, propane, gas, fertilizer. There's almost all of the products that we rely on in Canada are transported by rail one way or another. Grain, for example, 94% of grain is transported by rail. So, without both railways operating, we're going to be at almost a full economic shutdown.
Is there like auto sector, hugely impacted here. I just think of the potash that can't get to the U.S. is just, that's an example.
Yeah.
Ethanol into Canada, we're the largest importer of U.S. ethanol. Those are ones that come to mind right away, and there's many examples. Can the government actually let this happen? It just seems like this is a devastating situation for not only the economy, but Canadians as individuals. Everyone's going to feel this in some fashion. Can the government stop it?
It's a great question. So I spoke to the minister on Friday, and we talked about all the different tools that he has in his toolbox. One of the tools he has, and that previous ministers have had, previous governments have had, and that they've used sparingly, is back to work legislation. I think the challenge, though, is if the government tabled back to work legislation right now, I don't think the government has the votes in the House of Commons to get that legislation passed. I think that some of the parties in the House that we may have previously relied on in passing legislation like that, that support doesn't exist anymore. So I don't even think that tool exists. Another one that is being discussed lightly is binding arbitration. I do believe that the CIRB and other agencies can get to binding arbitration so that there is a third party negotiator and they have to get to an agreement. And the final decision, the final negotiation is decided by that third party instead of CN or CP or instead of the union. I think that's an option as well. The other option I discussed with the minister as well, and I think this is more long-term planning, is looking at maintenance of activities. So we know that we have maintenance of activities at ports. So last summer when the Port of Vancouver, for example, was on strike, grain was still able to be transported through the port and delivered to customers internationally. So we were at least still able to get grain rolling. Unfortunately, grain products like canola meal, canola oil, et cetera, those were hampered at the port. So there even needs to be a little updates on that. But what I was telling the minister was, look, we have maintenance of activities through the Canada Labor Code for ports. We should have that for railways as well, because both of those transportation networks, those supply chain networks are important to the grain sector. He agreed. So maybe we'll see changes in the future, but the situation that we're in right now, that's not going to help. So we're a little bit in a bind, though, we'll say, unless a negotiation is made at the table.
Go back to the first option, back to work.
Yeah.
The Liberals and the Conservatives couldn't pair up here and we wouldn't have enough votes?
I just don't think there's an appetite politically right now to be going against a union. I think all parties in the House are getting ready for the future election. Unions obviously are a big part of the Canadian fabric. And when you go against one union, you kind of go against them all. And so I know that every party in the House is trying to court that vote. That includes the Bloc, that includes the NDP as well. And I think at this point in the electoral cycle, I don't think any party is going to want to put themselves out there to be anti-union at a point when they're trying to court those votes. What
are you telling your members and their members to do here? What's the action points that how people can help out?
Yeah, I think number one is putting pressure on the parties to come to an agreement. I think at the end of the day, the power is really in the hands of CP, CN, and Teamsters Canada. And I think if those three, those two companies and the union truly cared about Canadians, truly cared about the Canadian economy, truly cared about the well-being of Canadians overall, they would come to an agreement and they would find a way to move past this. I have full confidence that the folks around that table should be able to negotiate and should be able to find an agreement. At the end of the day, we're all Canadians, right? We may be working for a company, or we may be working for a union, or we may be working for whomever. But at the end of the day, I think we should have the best outcomes for the Canadian economy at mind. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, well, you could do a couple things. One, you could just park at a railway track and just watch the amount of goods going back and forth on that line. It's when you really pay attention to, a lot of times we're driving down the road and be like, oh, look, a train, right? But you don't really think about what's all on that train. That's a good way to, I think, a bit of a wake-up call for everybody. And here's a number for you. We got $1 billion worth of goods moved by rail each day in Canada. $1 billion a day. Now, we've talked about some of the impact on Canadians, and we mentioned a little bit of the impact when it comes to our major trading part of the U.S. But this will have an impact as well on trading partners around the world. And at some point, with all these labor issues that Canada has been facing, not just this one, but others, at some point, people are going to be asking, is Canada really a reliable supplier? Because they seem to be a little bit strike happy. Am I being a little bit too harsh there?
No, you're bang on. And this is exactly what I told the minister on Friday as well. We have international customers that are looking at Canada to see, they already know that we provide some of the highest quality grain in the world. That's known, that's a fact. Another fact, though, that's starting to come into play is, are we a reliable provider of that grain, or are there other countries out there that may produce almost equal of quality grain out there, but they could actually deliver it on time? The challenge is let's say you have a pasta maker in Italy, or you have a bakery in Morocco, wherever it is. They have timelines. They need to deliver products to their customers, be it grocery stores, wholesalers, etc. There's a whole supply chain here, and they're relying on our Canadian transportation network to deliver them that grain. So in this case, that wheat or that durum on time, so they can process it into a loaf of bread, or they can process it into spaghetti that then they deliver to their local grocery chain or whatever it may be. When that's delayed by weeks or months, we really start to lose some of that reliability factor around the world. And there are other international competitors, be it the US, be it Australia, be it whomever, who are out there, and they're trying to get more market share as well. The whole international market is extremely competitive. And if we continue to have labor issues, supply chain issues, infrastructure issues, you name it, we already have a ton of issues as it relates to actually delivering our grain in the market. Labor is just one more on top of that. They're gonna find their grain elsewhere, and that's going to be a huge challenge for the Canadian economy and grain farmers in general.
Well, my opinion, I won't put words in your mouth, but my opinion here, we need the political parties to step up and stop thinking about votes with the unions and think about what's the impacts here of the Canadian economy. Those are my thoughts. But hey, Kyle, I really appreciate you joining us here today. Work hard on this one. We got farmers across Canada that tremendously rely on rail. So appreciate you joining us here today and give us an update.
Thanks, Shaun. And if there's one last thing I can tell the farmers, that we're going to keep being out there. We're going to keep advocating. We're going to keep talking to the minister, and hopefully we'll have better news to share before August 22nd. Thanks again.
Yep, great stuff. Hey, we'll be right back on RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 Sirius XM right after this.
FP Genetics relentlessly brings innovative new seed genetics to Canadian farms, ensuring growers, breeders, and farmers are supported and viable. Being a valued partner on your farm for decades, you can expect the continuous pursuit of the best genetics. Visit fpgenetics.ca to discover FP's hybrid fall rye varieties and their end uses, or contact your local FP seed dealer or territory manager to discuss your fall seed strategy specific to your region.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Hepner and Lindsay Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for a product spotlight with Koch Ag Services. We're joined right now by Bryce Geisel. He is the Canada Senior Agronomist with Koch Ag Services. Hey, Bryce, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me back, Shaun.
Yeah, it's great to chat with you. So, Bryce, what should farmers keep in mind right now about protecting their nitrogen this fall as we get into harvest, into that fall time, trying to get that fall work done? What are those considerations?
Well, farmers, you kind of utilize that fall nitrogen applications for efficiencies and to spread out the workload. And in Western Canada, we can get away with it as there are at least some benefits to our cold winters and frozen soils. So, however, fall applied nitrogen is still at risk for losses by volatilization, denitrification, and leaching before and after winter sets in. So utilizing a proper inhibitor with a high rate of active ingredient, it can help keep that nitrogen around until spring.
When we hear a lot about the 4Rs quite a bit, why does the right rate matter when it comes to nitrogen stabilizers?
No, that's a great question. And we think of right rate really as, kind of right rate of product going in. But we also need to be thinking about right rates of active ingredients and how that is really going to affect your nitrogen and some of those loss pathways that I kind of previously mentioned. And, with a fall nitrogen application, we need to protect it not only until the soil freezes, but try to prevent losses after the snow melts in the spring as well. So the best way to see if a product has comparable active ingredient rates is to kind of look at that parts per million as a apples to apples comparison. So the reality is some products have too low of rates of active ingredient to get us from that fall nitrogen application all the way until the spring seeding happens next year.
So how do the products that Koch Ag Services measure up in active ingredients?
So our products are scientifically tested and proven by researchers across Canada. So Super U is the standard for dual inhibitors and has been proven over and over again by researchers. And many farmers have found the agronomic and operational benefits of fall Super U applications. For any of those farms out there that may be using fall anhydrous ammonia, Centuro contains a new nitrification inhibitor that allows that application start before the soil cools enough to stop those microbes responsible for the nitrification of ammonia. And Anvil is a proven product to help reduce volatilization losses for farmers using operational efficiency of broadcast urea this fall. So you can learn more about the products and find comparisons at defendyourend.ca if you kind of want to see how those different products kind of stack up to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been talking to growers here at RealAg Radio for a while now here when it comes to thinking about Koch Ag Services and some of the great products that you have. When we think about fall application, are there best practices that some of your customers that you work with that they're engaging in to enhance the success rate of the fall season?
No, it's always a challenge. As we know, everything in farming is always a challenge. There's always some hurdle we're trying to get over. But really, we know from that fall nitrogen application, and we know that once the soil freezes, kind of everything that's been there and whatever state that it's in, whether it's in urea form or ammonia or nitrate form, whatever that state is, it's going to stick around. So we really want to try to get to that point, keeping as little of it as nitrate as possible going into that winter freeze. So that's where, if we could really target, getting right right before that soil gets cold enough and there's moisture to incorporate, that would be perfect. But unfortunately, and I don't think any of us can predict the weather that effectively. So we need to start thinking, well, how do we kind of use these products? And that's kind of the big thing is picking the right product. Kind of listed out some different ones. There's dual inhibitors, there's urease inhibitors, nitrification inhibitors. So it depends on the form of nitrogen the farmer is using this fall, and then picking the right product so that way they can kind of target those and make sure that it's going on, because we know there's a lot of acres to cover, so we want to make sure that they have that wider window. And that's what we're really trying to do, is create a wider window for those farmers so they can get that nitrogen on and they know it's going to be safe and staying there until, winter sets in. And then come next spring, we're not going to lose a bunch after snow melt. And when they get in with their seeders and they start putting that crop in the ground, that nitrogen will be there for those crops to take it up next year.
So for that fall application, Bryce, how cold do we want it to get? And does that cold need to be consistent? Can it get cold and then be warm again, or does it matter?
So in an ideal world, always it's going to be, if it stays cold and it'll stay frozen, that's going to be the best case scenario. But the way these winters have been going, it's all over the map. And so that's really kind of where we need to be looking at utilizing some of these inhibitors, because that kind of buys us that time. So we want to kind of think about that. And there's kind of different numbers people use, kind of 8 degrees Celsius is kind of when the microbes kind of stop. Anything below 8 degrees Celsius is kind of when those microbes stop kind of being active in the soil. So once that kind of stops, we tend to not to see that transition from ammonia over to nitrate as much. So that's where using something with a nitrification inhibitor kind of prevents that process chemically until those soils cool down, so you can start going a little bit earlier. And then if we even go before that, that's where we use the urease inhibitors. So that's kind of more on that broadcast soil surface, prevent that volatilization. So it's kind of that step-by-step change as we go there. And then once that soil's frozen, then that nitrogen is going to be stuck there until springtime. So.
Great stuff. Well, if you want more information on some of the products from Koch Agronomic Services, you can go to kochag.ca or kochagronomicservices.com. Bryce, thanks for joining us here today on RealAg Radio for this product spotlight.
All right. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, we'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
Advanced canola trait technology is here. And it's soon to be the talk of the town. Optimum Glide delivers excellent yield potential and agronomic trait performance. Improved crop safety. Enhanced weed control. And a wider window of application. You're going to want to see this. Learn more at OptimumGlide.ca.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio, brought to you today by Koch Agronomic Services. Well, we've been spending some time today talking about the potential rail strike that looks to be more and more of a higher probability here in Canada, which is an unprecedented event where we could potentially have both Canadian railways striking at the same time. This is an issue that's obviously going to impact agriculture. There's no doubt about that. That's pretty kind of a foregone conclusion, but it really impacts all of Canada. Here to talk more about it here is Greg Northey. He is Vice President of Corporate Affairs with Pulse Canada. Hey, Greg, great to chat with you again.
Hi, Shaun. Good to see you.
Okay, give me some perspective. The gravity of the situation that is in front of Canada right now.
Yeah, well, from our perspective, it's hard to imagine a potential labor disruption that would be more impactful on the economy. Both railways going down. There's no corollary. It's hard. You have one railway going down, obviously impactful. An airline going down, impactful. But both railways shutting down and basically stopping the Canadian economy. And this is something that I don't think we can understate the gravity of the situation for that.
From your perspective, cut to the chase. What needs to happen here? What are we heard earlier on RealAg Radio today from Kyle Larkin of the Grain Growers of Canada talking about how he described three options. From your perspective of Pulse Canada, your experience, you've spent a lot of time in the transport sector, Greg. What do you see as the path here for a resolution?
Yeah, well, look, we focus on labor issues a lot, and a lot of it is in the realm of more long-term elements and how to prevent issues from happening, whether it's essential service or, really speaking about the importance of back to work legislation in the event of a strike, sort of these more hypothetical long-term elements. This situation is very different. We know both railways have said they will lock out their employees on August 22nd, so less than 10 days. And so we have a very limited runway to prevent that. And so now it's about, what we can do to do that, what we can do to prevent that, and what the focus should be. And so in our view, that the one pathway we have ahead of us here is for the minister to use the powers he has within the labor code in section 107 and actually refer what's happening in negotiations to the Canadian Industrial Relations Board. Obviously, we've just been through a process like that. That was a bit different. That was around whether there should be essential services within the rail that should be protected in the event of a strike. But at this point, we know there's going to be a lockout, and what we've been seeing is we're not fully sure that negotiations are happening in good faith. And so the possibility of a negotiated agreement is really unclear. It doesn't seem to be on the table. And so the minister at this point, with the powers that he has, needs to address that and use his powers to assess whether those negotiations are actually functioning right now.
And so is the solution there binding arbitration then?
Absolutely, it could be. They look at it, and that's absolutely on the table. The minister could refer to the Industrial Relations Board, assess whether things are happening in good faith, and they could impose an agreement. They could ask for binding arbitration on an agreement. They have a series of different remedies they could potentially do. Our focus right now, for sure, would be, the quickest, cleanest way could be binding arbitration, because it allows the two parties to still, table their best deal and have a third party assess it. But binding arbitration, it has to be on the table for that, and as a solution when they look at it.
In order for that solution to happen, can the minister demand that that's the solution? Do both parties, both sides, have to voluntarily agree to binding arbitration, or what happens here?
Yeah, generally, and this is where we start to get into gray areas, but our feeling is that this is the unprecedented situation means that, all options have to be on the table, is the two parties have to agree to binding arbitration. As we saw in the recent WestJet case, because that was a first collective bargaining agreement, there is the ability to actually impose binding arbitration. This case is different with CN and CPN and the unions. But the reality is it's never been tested in this way. And so there certainly are the chances of it, or the testing of the ability for the minister to actually explicitly say, we need to look at binding arbitration because this is not happening. The two parties are not coming together in the way that would represent an opportunity to actually have a negotiated agreement is not there. We want to see binding arbitration. I think you'd absolutely start to see an assessment of that against law, against case law. But I think the situation we have now is such that all these things have to be on the table. We have to look at this very seriously.
What are you hearing from members? Individual farmers that are growing pulses? There's got to be a lot of concern here based on, as you've mentioned, how far the two parties are apart, especially with combines rolling through the field. We're at a very inopportune time here I don't think there's ever a good time for this, but we're really at a bad time for agriculture.
Yeah, 100%. We've got peas being harvested now. Generally, those go straight off the combine and for export. And what we've been seeing actually in the Ag Transport Coalition numbers is that there has been a big, as far as demand, as far as trying to get orders on the books for the railways has been higher than usual for this time of year. So, the system has been gearing up for it. And August 22nd, like I said, less than 10 days, the whole system could be shut down. And it's not, it's deeply concerning. We've never seen something like this. It's going to be hugely impactful.
Is there work happening behind the scenes? Like, this is bigger than an ag issue. Okay. A lot of times, Aggies, we stay in our little bubble and hey, this is an ag issue. And once in a while, it branches out to another industry. This one branches out to all of them.
Yeah, everybody.
Is there work behind the scenes happening cross industry in terms of how to collaborate in terms of moving this needle because we only have 10 days?
Absolutely. So, I mean, there's been a flurry of letters. Generally, labor issues like this result in a lot of letters going in, and so there's been collaborative letters across industries, across agriculture and everyone else. I've been sitting in meetings with departmental staff, with ministerial staff, with a broader coalition, really expressing how big of a concern this is. And I would say it's not that no one is understanding how big of a concern is it. It's just that like we're seeing with the railway and the unions, everyone's just sort of taking what we think is quite a relaxed view of this right now. And our point right now is that we can't be relaxed about it. And just from an agriculture perspective, we've started a campaign at stopthestrike.ca where we're basically trying to, we have a letter writing campaign. We're trying to encourage farmers, exporters. This is specifically for the ag industry to write in and ask for action, this very specific action for the minister to take using his powers in 107. And so that's what we're doing in the ag industry. We're going to be spooling that up, trying to get other industries involved. But, from an agriculture perspective, we can speak with a really loud voice. Farmers should be very, very vocal about this right now. This is, like I said, massively consequential. Yeah. It's hard to be too hyperbolic about it, but it's a big deal.
I understand. But to be fair, we got 10 days. What good are letters? Like, doesn't the minister already have the awareness that this is a fundamentally catastrophic economic situation?
You would hope so, but I think the minister has faith, and we're not sure it's founded, that the two parties are bargaining in good faith, that they will actually, what they can do together, or the three parties, will actually result in a negotiated agreement. And what it takes, quite honestly, for the minister to act in something like this, to actually pull the trigger on a section 107 is voices, is industries letting him know that at this point it's not, he can't put the trust in the two parties. He has to act. He has to intervene in this way. And so, the power of a letter writing campaign in that sense, especially when it comes from farmers, can be quite significant.
I've had numerous audience members point out to me the fact that, speaking of parties, political parties, everybody, the liberals and the conservatives are trying to cater to the union vote right now, as we're just over a year away from potentially an election, or it could be sooner. Is that having an effect here? Like, the union would know that. The railway knows that. Is that creating a bit of a thorn in the side of this coming to a resolution?
Well, I think in some ways you can probably trace the lockouts or the focus on the lockouts from the railways to that. I mean, the reality is the unions are this is the thing with everybody involved in this. The unions are very aware of the economic lever that they hold, right?
Oh, yeah.
With the strike and the sort of pressure that puts in a negotiating situation. The railways clearly recognize that. They also recognize the power of a lockout and the impact on that and the leverage that's going to put on the unions. And obviously the minister by now definitely understands the impact of this. And so I think all sides are using their leverage that they see fit. And the reality is the ability to bargain, to form a union and to leverage that power within negotiations is an enshrined right in Canada, and it really isn't about that. No one's disputing that, but the reality is that when you don't see evidence of good faith bargaining happening, and obviously we're not at the bargaining table, but just from what we see in the statements and the fact that this has been going on for so long, and we're just seeing this game of chicken happening, it's becoming bigger than just that. It's becoming something that, how do you respect the abilities for two parties to come to a negotiated agreement that they're satisfied with, without bringing such a sort of a catastrophic situation to the Canadian economy. And there's tools to do that, and we and this is where we're focused right now.
Yeah. Greg, thanks a lot for joining us here today on RealAg Radio. Appreciate it. Like you said, we have 10 days. The countdown is on, so to speak. So go to stopthestrike.ca. Greg, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Shaun. Appreciate it.
Hey, we'll be right back on RealAg Radio. We're going to change the subject. We're going to talk about the July results. They're just out today of the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index. How do you feel about your current and future financial performance on the farm? We'll get to that when we come back with Justin Funk right after this.
Since 2010, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has been helping farmers to grow great wheat. Covering everything from markets, the latest research, pest and disease control, all the way down to on-farm trials, the Wheat School has everything your crop needs. Check out our massive video library on YouTube and grow great wheat with the Wheat School, brought to you by Syngenta Canada, C&M Seeds, and Alberta Grains.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. Hey, the best answer for agronomically effective dual nitrogen protection is Super U Premium Fertilizer from Koch Ag Services. To learn how this ready-to-use granular fertilizer protects nitrogen and boosts efficiency, visit kochag.ca. Okay, I love when we get to do this. We're going to dig into the results of the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index, this time for July. This survey was done in the third week of July. A lot is happening at this time. We've got a kind of lack of rain in Western Canada, people concerned about their yields. We've got some adversity in the growing season in Eastern Canada and Central Canada as well. But harvest is here and upon us. So this is an exciting time. How does it, all that volatility and variables impact how you're feeling about your farm business? We're going to dive into that right now with Justin Funk of RealAgristudies. Hey, Justin, how's it going?
Hey, pretty good, Shaun. How are you?
I'm doing great. Okay, let's dig into what we see here. What did farmers say for the July 24 edition of the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index when we look at current farm financial performance and future farm financial performance?
Yeah, so remained relatively unchanged. So current farm financial performance held steady. We went from an 85 in April to an 84. So just a point difference, which really isn't significant. From the future farm financial performance, always been negative. Keep in mind, but went from 87 down to 84. So a little bit more of a dip on that one, but within the margin of error. So, I think our general takeaway is that from a financial, current and future perspective, the sentiment has remained relatively unchanged.
What's interesting to me here, we haven't dropped further. Like if you look at current farm financial performance and you look in October, last fall, we were at a 90. And you think about how far the market has deteriorated from last October to today, the fact we're only at an 84, it is kind of surprising. It's refreshing to me. It is surprising, though, that we haven't seen more deterioration of that number. And I'm also comparing that to some of the anecdotal conversations we've had here on RealAg Radio, especially on the Farmer Rapid Fire on Thursday. So, I'm going to take a positive in that, in the fact that number hasn't eroded too far.
Yeah, and we should also remind listeners that 100 is neutral. So anything below 100 we consider negative sentiment. Anything above 100 is positive sentiment. So, we are in the negative territory, but it could be more negative. Let's put it that way.
So that's current and future farm financial performance. I want to skip to confidence in making farm investments. Okay, is now a good time to be making investments in my farm?
So ever since we started doing this project, which goes back to September of 2022, that number has deviated very little from around between 50 and 53, let's say. In April, we saw that number go up a bit to 58, and in this latest iteration of the study, it jumped to 63. So still low, well below that neutral line, so negative sentiment, but we're starting to see a trend now going from 50 to 58 to 63, and a lot of that has also coincided with the changes to the interest rates. So I think there is something to look out for here from a positive point of view.
Yeah, it does indeed. And if your balance sheet is in good shape, you got good free cash flow, you got some cash on hand, you got some money sitting on the sidelines, so to speak. That's how they would describe it in the equity market. This is maybe an opportunity, right? Where prices have dipped, especially on the machinery side. We've seen a lot of deterioration in certain categories of used machinery. New prices, I think we can see probably some price declines there based on lack of demand. There's some opportunity there for people to take advantage of some of that pricing situation, so to speak. Okay, Justin, let's look at the markets. A lot of attention on those markets right now. We have been moving lower in general. Across really all the broad grown commodities across North America. How do farmers feel about their confidence in marketing crops and their outlook on prices at this time?
So both of these questions have shown a bit of a roller coaster when it comes to the results that we see. For confidence in marketing crops, we saw that one remain relatively unchanged. It went from an 85 to an 83, so a little bit of a decrease, but not a whole lot. And then the outlook on selling crops, which the question is, should I be holding my crops with anticipation that prices are going to go higher, or should I be selling now because I feel prices are going to be going lower? This one has been a huge roller coaster. So we were in way positive territory a year ago in July of 23. At a 138, we dropped down to a 115, a few months later, then into negative territory at 95, but back up in April to a 117, and now we're down to a 108. So it's positive, but it's starting to show perhaps a little bit more of that downward trend, which I think we probably would assume would be the case.
It's been a tough time to market your crops. I understand the lack of confidence. Would you describe, if you look at confidence in marketing crops, we've had a high of 91, a low of 75, or going back to July of 23. Is that, pretty stable? Is that how would you describe, being in that kind of narrow band? We've kind of jumped around, but it's been a pretty narrow band. How do you describe those numbers?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the average has been pretty, it's showing pretty consistent there. I mean, they're deviating a little bit here and there, up and down, but I think it's just showing that people just don't know how to answer that question, to be honest. I mean, it's hard to be confident in marketing when you see those, the next question on the outlook on selling crops jumping around so much. So 91 to an 83, it's not a huge swing like we've seen in some of the other questions that we've asked. But for the most part, I don't know if we can draw too many conclusions from these particular numbers.
Yeah, given the volatility that we have seen in the market, and think back to September of 22, right? We've seen the market go up like a hockey stick. We've seen the market go down like an upside down hockey stick. And that confidence has stayed fairly stable below the neutral line, right? And so maybe that's just kind of a state of mind of the grower. We're on mass in general, we're going to be in this band. And I look at the outlook on selling crops. We're a 108 for July of 24, just above the neutral line. That's down from April. We're at a 117. Going back to January, we were at a 95. So that's that volatility that we've been talking about, which has got, we've seen the same kind of volatility in the December corn chart, for example, or the spring wheat chart, maybe even more so indeed. And I also have the reaction at a 108 on outlook on selling crops. I thought this would be more in the negative because this is, remember, the timing of this in the back end of July. This is when things were really kind of on the descent from a price perspective. I thought people would turn more bearish, but maybe there's some hope in this number. There's some growers out there that believe the market's going to go higher from here because we've oversold it. Right? That could be a bit of and people looking on their fields, dry in Western Canada, dry in the Midwest in certain areas, people thinking that maybe we're going to surprise to the downside on yield. That would spark the market higher, but we'll have to see how that all works out once we get the combines in the field.
Yeah, there's also a pretty big differential between these smallest farms and the largest farms on how that question was answered. So just for reference, smaller farms average 64 on the outlook on selling crops. That's way negative. The largest farms answered an average of 112. So, I mean, you look at that's almost double the sentiment. So something going on there, which of course also is taken into account through geography, with some of the larger farms being in the western part of the country.
Yeah. Interesting that the breakdown based on farm size. Hey, let's finish up talking about state of mental health. Important numbers here.
Yeah, so we asked this question: is your mental health in a better position, worse position, or about the same position as it was a year ago? And I'm always pleased to report that this number has never really changed all that much. We've seen it bounce around a little within a couple points, but for July of 24, it's in at a 97, so it's just below that neutral line. Of course, we'd love for it to be at 100 or above, but being at 97 is pretty good, especially given everything else we've just talked about. We did ask a follow-up question, though, and that what do you do for mental health, like to maintain your mental health through the production season? And just a couple of interesting things I want to share with you. These were open-ended comments from people talking about how they look after themselves. And they include things like taking time away from the farm or visiting with friends, staying active and exercising. A lot of emphasis on faith. So praying, Bible studies, meditating, reading, and in some cases, counseling. So recognizing that something that can't be done on their own, that they look to professional help to help them get through some of these tough times. So I appreciate farmers being open with us and sharing not just how they're feeling from a mental health standpoint, but also what they're doing about it as well.
Really thoughtful perspectives there.
Yeah,
that's awesome. That's great. Which one of those would you choose for yourself?
Well, as a small business owner, I can kind of relate to a certain degree. Taking time away from, the business, working on myself is something that I would do. And that might involve visiting with friends and exercising. I'm not a reader, Shaun. I wish I was, but I know you talked about this. All the books that you read, and I can't really get into that, but I certainly can't rely on the Blue Jays this year, though, to do anything for my mental health. But
no,
there's always next year.
Well, hey, great stuff, Justin. Hey, important information that we're talking about here with the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index, and encourage everybody to go to RealAgristudies.com. Justin and I have posted a video really diving into these numbers in a little bit, a lot more detail, actually. So you can check that out at RealAgristudies.com or, of course, at RealAgriculture.com. And we're going to be talking about some more of the results here over the coming days and weeks. So, Justin, hey, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you, Shaun.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's show. Really, this strike is it's a big deal. It is a big deal. It is unprecedented, catastrophic economic impacts here that we are talking about. I don't want to be too hyperbolic about it, but let's be honest. Both major railways halted at the exact same time. Pretty hard to make a case that it's not going to have any sort of an impact at all. Hey, want your feedback, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Or, of course, you can find us across all the different social media platforms as Real Agriculture, or call the Real Ag feedback line, 855-776-6147. Big thanks to Koch Ag Services for being the sponsor of today's show. Make sure you go to kochag.ca. Thanks so much, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with Real Ag Radio, and we'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.
Get flexible farm financing with an APP cash advance from CCGA. Save on interest costs and sell when the time and price are best for you. Visit ccga.ca to learn more. Cash advances are made under the Government of Canada's Advanced Payments Program.